Live. My name is Rudy Mireles, and I'm your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of deep South Texas. We've got a lot to get to today. Our South Texas correspondent, Sandra Sanchez, is going to join us in just a little bit to talk about the number of ICE arrests that have been really just trending downwards every single month since the beginning of the Trump administration. We're also going to look into a couple other things that she's been tracking. We've told you about those visa changes. Well, there's some more changes coming that way, and we're also going to talk about the latest on that fight to keep the screw worm south of the border so it doesn't infect our cattle and ultimately start affecting our dinner tables. But first, let's take a look at some of the headlines making news across the border. Beginning with this at the top of our show, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem visited Ruidoso, New Mexico today to tour areas that were hit by devastating flooding in July. You may remember when this happened. Our El Paso correspondent Julian Resendez covered this very extensively for us, everything from the immediate aftermath to what Borstar was doing out there to rescue individuals in the middle of the actual severe weather. But Noam spent time this afternoon walking and talking with local officials about that severe flash flooding. Heavy rain falling on the burn scar from last year's South Fork and Salt fires causing the flooding that killed 3 people. 65 swiftwater rescues were carried out, and as many as 400 homes were impacted by the quickly rising water. The federal government issued a major disaster declaration for New Mexico back in July in order to provide funding for the communities there that had experienced damage from the floods. A very similar scene to what we saw back over the Independence Day holiday weekend in North Texas as well, or Central Texas, rather. Also happening across the border, you've got to see and listen to the sounds of the next story. I'm going to play the sound for you in a minute. A federal agent fired several shots at a moving car after the driver sped off following an immigration stop in San Bernardino, California, which is east of Los Angeles. That's the story according to the Department of Homeland Security, which says the driver struck 2 federal agents on Saturday as he drove away. They say that prompted one agent to fire his weapon in self-defense, but the driver, a 43-year-old man from Mexico, tells another story.
What do you want?
What do you want? Identification.
No, la voy a abrir.
Hey, you can't do that.
No le abras, no le abras, no le abras.
And that is a look at the video you just saw. And as you just heard, that video shows agents approach the car, tell him to roll down the window. He refuses, and one of the passengers says, "What do you want?" The agents then smash windows on both sides of the car. The driver immediately drove away, and 3 shots can later be heard in the video. That video, as you can see, doesn't show either officer being hit by that vehicle. The driver called the San Bernardino Police Department and reported that masked men had pulled him over, broke his car window, and shot at him, the police department said in a statement. Now, federal agents later went to the man's house, but the family did not allow them to enter because they did not have a warrant. They showed video where, did not have a warrant. They showed video where an agent smashes the car windows and appears to strike the driver in the head. The driver immediately drives away, and 3 shots can be heard in that video. Also happening in Home Depots, or demonstrators protested inside a Home Depot in Southern California on Sunday after an increase in ICE raids across that area. Footage released by the Party for Socialism and Liberation shows people marching and chanting, quote, "ICE out of Home Depot," end quote. Now, this was in Monrovia, which is a suburb of Los Angeles, and the name of a town that keeps popping up in these stories recently. These demonstrations come after a man was hit and killed by an SUV while running away from an ICE raid last Thursday. Home Depot stores have become familiar targets for immigration action as day laborers like to gather outside looking for work every morning, according to local news reports. It's time to bring in now our South Texas correspondent, Sandra Sanchez. Sandra, you have some news on the latest numbers from ICE arrests. Fill us in.
Yeah, those were crazy videos that you just showed us, Rudy. And the Trump administration has put a lot of pressure on the Department of Homeland Security to continue increasing the number of arrests by immigration customs enforcement agents. Their goal is to find people who are in the country illegally. But the truth of the matter is, according to Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse TRAC, which is used to be affiliated with Syracuse University, a very respected data collector, they're located in New York. They're actually saying that from July 1 through the 26th, bookings by ICE agents were down almost 20% in facilities, detention facilities. There were an average of 990 migrants per day who were arrested, booked into facilities. That's down from 1,224 average the month before in June. So, the total number of people in July was just over 31,200, and most still are being arrested by ICE. This is a big flip-flop from a few years ago when it was mostly U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers or Border Patrol agents who were arresting people. Now, ICE had in July 27,483 arrests, only 3,798 by CBP. So that's according to TRAC numbers. Total number in ICE custody is approaching 57,000, highest ever. But that is still, I'm sorry, not the highest ever. That's down 1.5% from June, which was the highest ever. So we were at 57,861 in June. So, I don't know what's causing this trend to change, but the number of arrests going down. But I can tell you that there is something interesting to note in the data, and you and I both love to dig into data. The number of migrants removed from the United States actually increased. So they had fewer arrests, but they had 84 more migrants sent away, whether repatriated, sent to other countries per day in the month of July.
And I'm wondering how many of those in that increase is actually self-deportations, because that's something we've been hearing a lot more of lately. Our Jorge Vela, who's a reporter here at KVEO TV in Harlingen, I think in the last 2 weeks has told me two different stories of people just choosing to self-deport after these ICE raids.
That very well could be contributing to it. There also, are much quicker decisions made, and people just being told, you are not going to qualify for asylum, you are not going to enter the country, and you are just, so they're just making the voluntary decision to not even try the process, and they're just leaving very quickly, which saves the country money as far as the detention costs. And so that's what the numbers are looking like.
Yeah, it should be interesting to see what happens, because we know these ICE agents kind of have a quota that they want to meet on arresting people that, whether it be overstayed visas or entered the country illegally. So, with those arrest numbers going down, but the quota still being there, it should be interesting if they ramp up ICE raids in other locations, maybe towards the interior of the country. But I guess we'll find out in a matter of a couple weeks when we get the latest numbers for the month of August. Now, you mentioned something about saving money on detention centers. You've also got some news about some detention center issues happening on the east side of the country, correct?
Well, yeah, in all this number crunching, we were able to kind of decipher where people are being held. Interestingly, the most people are being detained in Natchez, Mississippi, and there are an average of 2,169 migrants being held there on any given day. That's by far the most. The next couple of places, Stewart Detention Center in Lumpkin, Georgia, had 1,892, so almost 1,900 people on average every day in July. And then the South Texas ICE Processing Center in Pearsall, here, just up the road a couple hours, had the third most with 1,679 migrants average daily. A list of the top 15, which we have crunched for you, can be found on borderreport.com.
Now, we've over the last couple of weeks gotten different messages. We've spoke to migrant advocates who say that we don't even know truly what some of these people are being arrested for, if anything other than just being here in the country without permission. But we heard the Trump administration border czar Tom Homan just a couple days before that say something along the lines of 70% of the people that we're getting rid of are hardened criminals. We're talking murderers, rapists, things like that. Are the people that are being held right now, are they being held with or without any kind of convictions?
Well, actually, it's interesting because the number that Track came out with is that 70% of the people who are being detained have no criminal conviction. Now, it's very possible that, as Mr. Homan said, that they are getting rid of the worst, as they call it. We get these lists every day from DHS showing, and yes, I read through it, charged with rape, pedophile, murder, all sorts of charges. But basically, the people who are being held in detention, 70.4% have no criminal convictions. The majority, 30%, the rest of them, the 30% that are left, have what they call minor offenses, mostly traffic violations, DUIs, things like that.
Yeah, that worst of the worst list is something we'll talk about it every once in a while because as you said, we're getting that list. It's the first time we've seen these daily updates, but we know they're arresting more than just 2 or 3 people a day. So it's definitely interesting. There have been reports from individuals inside detention facilities, and in the case of the so-called alligator Alcatraz, we've actually had security contractors allegedly speak out about the conditions there. There's a new report from Senator Jon Ossoff in Georgia. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Senator Ossoff, he's a Democrat from Georgia, and he came out with a report actually July 31st, and it's just now kind of starting to get some traction. It's called The Abuse of Pregnant Women and Children and in U.S. Immigration Detention. He says that he has started an investigation into the idea that women and children are having crimes committed against them in these facilities. He says there have been 510, quote, credible reports of human rights abuses against individuals. These would be held in the DHS facilities, Bureau of Prison, Health and Human Services facility, that's where the children are held, county jails, or federal buildings. That includes 25 states and Puerto Rico, and also U.S. military bases. And he says that these assaults have also occurred on U.S. chartered flights where people are being sent back.
No, that's it's definitely something. Has DHS said anything in response to this? Because this is a pretty big deal. One of Georgia's sitting senators making claims like this.
Well, and let me tell you. So he says that there have been 41 reports of physical and sexual abuse against women in immigration detention facilities, 14 reports of mistreatment of pregnant women, and 18 reports of mistreatment of children. So like you said, these are some heavy-duty allegations leveled, and I very quickly do want to say Department of Homeland Security has completely debunked the report. They call it false. They say in a statement, Senator Ossoff's false allegations of subprime conditions have been debunked time and time again by DHS. ICE detention facilities have higher standards than most U.S. prisons that detain American citizens. All detainees are provided with comprehensive medical care, proper meals, and are given the opportunity to call their family and attorneys. These false allegations are garbage and are part of the reason ICE agents are now facing a 1,000% increase in assaults against them.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting stuff. We'll see what the report ends up saying, or the investigation rather ends up saying when that is all concluded.
It's early days, and the investigation started in January.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sandra. Stick around, though. Sandra's going to stick around with us, and we're going to continue the conversation. We're going to talk about the latest on those visa changes that we've been telling you about over the last couple of weeks. So stay with us. We'll Report Live is back in 1 minute. Welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles. I'm your host here in Harlingen, Texas. South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez joining us on the program today. Before we get to those visa changes, I wanted to talk about there's the potential for more troops coming to the border, Sandra.
Can you hear me?
Sorry about that.
To Washington, D.C.
Oh, I see. To Washington, D.C.
Yes. More troops into Washington, D.C. I think it's really interesting that there have been so many complaints by people in the Washington district, D.C., in the Capitol about this. Now, full disclosure, I was born in Washington, D.C. I grew up there. I went to college there. So, that is actually my hometown.
I just want to say that I treat it as my second hometown. I love D.C. so much. Lived there for a few years while working for the District of Columbia Air National Guard. So I get it. I have a lot of love for the city.
But, you know, I just find it interesting that there's so many people who are now complaining, oh, my gosh, there's a National Guardsman in front of Union Station, in front of the Washington Monument, in front of, the White House. And yet we have here on the border been living since 2021, since March of 2021, when Texas Governor Greg Abbott established Operation Lone Star with National Guardsmen throughout South Texas. I have to say, they have never been anything but polite to me, kind to me. They've given information, helped me. Usually they can't talk to a reporter, but whenever I've approached one, they have, been very courteous. So I'm not complaining. I'm saying I think it's interesting that the nation's capital has suddenly woken up and seen, in comparison to kind of, maybe they're realizing a little bit of what people have been saying down here. There have been these charges of militarization on the border and just feeling like that. Now, granted, geographically, Washington, D.C. is a much more compressed, smaller area, right?
Yeah.
Than we're talking hundreds of
Was it 8 square miles there?
It's tiny, right? But, and they have about 400 there now, or they're doubling the amount of National Guardsmen that are coming, because 4 additional states have announced today that they're going to send National Guardsmen. So I think they're going to be up to like 1,200 National Guardsmen, if I'm correct, from the Hill pretty soon in that small area. We had 400 additional National Guard soldiers come down in January. Now, they're not exactly saying how many are here. They say that's an operational statistic, and South Texas is vast and wide. It takes me 3 hours and 15 minutes to get to Laredo, and so you don't notice them as much, but we have had them here.
And I think it's interesting to note too that, one thing that a lot of folks I don't think, keep in mind is I was kind of a rarity when I was in the Air National Guard. I had come from active duty and I was there as a full-time guardsman. So it was like, transitioning, from one office to the next, basically. I had different duties, different responsibilities. But at the end of the day, I was essentially, for all intensive duties, kind of like an active duty member still. Mm-hmm. But the National Guard in each state is comprised, the majority of it is comprised by what we call traditional guard. And those folks are just doing 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. So when you say, and this is not to take away from what they do whatsoever, because they are incredibly capable. They are trained to be, just plugged into the regular force when necessary, whether it be downrange in a combat zone in Iraq or Afghanistan, or, during a training operation here. But I think the important thing for folks to remember is that these are people who Monday through Friday, they're teachers, they're firefighters. Some of them are journalists. We have people within our organization that are National Guard members of their respective states. So, it's kind of important to remember, too, these folks are doing something away from their home and away from their normal duties, and probably some of them getting paid a lot less to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. What I'm looking forward to is just seeing if this changes the perspective by some of those policymakers in Washington, D.C., how they feel about it. We'll see.
Yeah, it should definitely be interesting. Now, time to get to the thing that we've been talking about for a couple weeks now, because there's changes coming, and they're coming fast, and one of them is the visa changes. So tell us a little bit about these new tests for visas.
Well, yeah, we spoke a couple weeks ago about they were going to start charging a bond for some people from certain countries who apply for visas. Today, the U.S. Customs and Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS, issued a new policy memorandum. And basically it says that they are going to take a more holistic approach when determining whether to award U.S. citizenship to immigrants. Now, the Hill was the first to report this, and they're saying that they're going to weigh factors to determine whether an applicant has, quote, good moral character. Now, this afternoon, USCIS actually posted a link to this policy change. It doesn't use the words moral character, but throughout it, it says if someone has been affiliated with a terrorist organization, has supported an organization that's against the American government, they were going to weigh, each individual case basis to determine whether that person fits and should be allowed into the United States. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and as someone, who has never been through the visa process, I haven't asked any of my friends that have been through it what it was like. And so, coming into it in the dark, you would assume that, making sure that someone's not related to a terrorist organization is kind of just, boilerplate stuff.
Right, absolutely. And I think that maybe the Trump administration wants to make that crystal clear. And, you know, and if it wasn't in the documents before, well, it absolutely is now. And there's links to it, and we have the Hill story up on our website also.
Well, make sure to check that out, borderreport.com, if you'd like to read more on that or any of the reporting that you hear here on Border Report Live. Now, one of the questions I wanted to ask is, you know, we talked about the overstaying of visas being one of the main drivers behind these changes to the program. How many people are overstaying their visas every year?
Yeah, well, just to back up, so they're going to start issuing these bonds, 5,000, 10,000, or 15,000. It actually starts tomorrow, August 20th. And so the number of people who have overstayed the visas, there were to be 39 million departures, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago in fiscal year 2023, but 565,155, so 500,000 overstayed. So they have implemented this policy, but they're starting with, and so visa overstays by countries, Haiti and Venezuela, 31%, top overstayers, Dominican Republic, Brazil, and China. But they are starting with these bonds that are being levied to Malawi and Zambia.
Those are two countries we didn't see on that list.
They weren't. And there's so Malawi is on the south eastern coast of Africa, and Zambia is right next to it. I'm not familiar with either, but that starts tomorrow. So this is $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000.
All right. Well, thank you so much for reporting on that. We're going to speak to you one more time when we come back from the break. Stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. Welcome back to the program. My name's Rudy. That is Sandra. Sandra, I wanted to check in one last time because we had the Ag Secretary, Brooke Rollins, in the state to speak with the governor about this screwworm threat. Fill us in.
Yeah, just recently, Brooke Rollins came and she spoke with Texas Governor Greg Abbott about the New World screwworm. It looks like the Department of Agriculture is going to sink another $100 million investment to trying to eradicate this parasite. Just to reiterate, this is actually a fly, but when it's in its larva stages, it burrows into wounds and to animals, to livestock, even pets and humans, and cause infection and death. And actually, the female fly looks for an odorous place to lay her eggs. So what they do is they are dispersing sterile flies from Moore Air Base in Edinburgh, outside Edinburgh in Hidalgo County, just near us here. And they're making these flights. Well, now, in addition to that, they're starting to build a facility there to produce the sterile flies, not just fly them from there. And what's interesting is they're also doing something called allocating funds for tick patrol mounted riders who are going to look for screwworms. I think we have Secretary Rollins maybe talking a little bit about the importance of this new personnel here on the border.
But we are ramping up the hiring of USDA-employed mounted patrol officers known as the tick riders or the tick crew.
She froze up a little bit there, but that was the main gist of what she was going to say. Basically, the screwworms have been sighted 300 miles from the border. And so they're getting closer. You know, last November they were first detected in Mexico. So
yeah, I think it was just in the on the southern border of Mexico, right? So yeah, they're making their way up. And I know it seems like every couple of weeks we keep hearing updates. I know Governor Abbott was there. I think we have some sound from him. Let's take a listen to that.
This is an issue that is essential to the cattle industry, to food supply, which are at risk because of a screwworm. To begin to address this, a few weeks ago, I announced the Texas New World Screwworm Response Team, who've been working on strategies to better address this at the state level. The reality is this is a national and international issue. The screwworm typically comes from South America, makes its way up through Central America into Mexico before reaching Texas. It has gone through all of those geographic regions and now is in southern part of Mexico. And is nearing Texas. And we are going to face these dire economic consequences. Our industries, our ranchers, people who buy groceries are going to face these dire consequences if action is not taken to deny the ability of the screwworm being able to get into the state of Texas.
And there you have it. Sandra, thank you so much for reporting on this. Before we go, because we only have a few seconds, I did just get some breaking news, and this is actually ESPN through the Associated Press reporting this, but Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. has been deported to Mexico for alleged cartel ties. The boxer has been deported to Mexico where he's wanted for alleged cartel ties following his arrest in the U.S. for overstaying his visa and lying on a green card application. That was big news here not too long ago, earlier in the summer, so this is the latest. According to this, he was handed over by authorities, admitted to a prison in the northern state of Sonora, an official told the AP. So we'll have more on that for you tomorrow. Again, thank you, Sandra, and thank you at home for watching. Have a great day.